The Galactic Council chamber on Araxis Prime was filled with voices that carried the weight of 100 civilizations. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy had gathered, and the air was thick with tension. The humans had arrived. Ambassador Nathan Cole walked into the hall with calm steps, his black suit simple but sharp, his face steady and unreadable. Behind him walked his aide Laura King, holding a small tablet that contained the notes for their final session. The other delegates watched them in silence, their eyes showing both curiosity and unease. Humanity had grown too strong, too fast, and no one knew what they might do next. Nathan moved to the center of the council floor and took his seat among beings that shimmered, floated, or glowed. When he began to speak, his voice was calm but carried through the entire chamber. He said that humanity had always respected the council, that Earth had supported the treaties, shared technology, and joined in peacekeeping missions. But now he said there were limits to patience. He said that for too long, the Council had treated humanity as a lesser partner, enforcing trade restrictions and blocking Earth's expansion beyond certain borders. The hall buzzed with whispers as he spoke. He asked for equality, not favor, only the right to stand as one of them, not beneath them. When he finished, he sat back and waited. The Council leader, a tall crystalline being named Varun, leaned forward. His body shimmered with pale blue light as he spoke. He said that humanity's requests would be considered, but that such matters took time and care. Nathan listened quietly, his jaw tightening. He had heard those same words for years. Varun turned to the assembly and opened the floor for debate. What followed was chaos. Delegates shouted over one another in dozens of languages, their voices layered through translation devices. Some spoke in support of humanity, saying Earth had earned its place. Others warned that humans were too emotional, too dangerous, that they had built fleets faster than any species before them. Nathan and Laura listened in silence. They knew every argument by heart. Laura leaned closer and whispered that nothing would change. Nathan nodded slightly. Hours passed. The discussions went in circles filled with flattery and fear. Varun raised his crystalline hands to restore order. He declared that the council would maintain its current stance for now and revisit the issue at a later date. That was when Nathan stood. His chair scraped softly against the floor and the noise of the hall died instantly. Every delegate turned to him. His voice was steady, controlled, and quiet, but every word struck like a hammer. He said that humanity had listened long enough, waited long enough, trusted long enough. He said that if equality could not be given, humanity would no longer ask. He said that Earth would no longer take part in a council that only listened to itself. Laura rose beside him and began gathering their data files. The silence that filled the hall was heavy and cold. Varun tried to speak, but Nathan cut him off with a raised hand. He said there was nothing left to discuss. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing across the chamber. Laura followed closely behind, her face pale but composed. No one tried to stop them. Every eye followed their movement until the great doors closed behind them. The silence held for several seconds, then whispers began to spread like a wave. Some called it madness, others called it courage. Varun sat frozen in his seat, his light dimming slightly. He looked toward the place where the humans had stood moments ago and saw only emptiness. The humans had not raised their voices, had not made threats, but the effect was the same as a declaration of war. Outside the hall, Nathan and Laura stepped into the transport bay where a sleek silver shuttle waited for them. As the engines hummed to life, Laura looked at him and asked if he was certain about what they had done. Nathan looked out through the viewport at the stars beyond and said that it was not about certainty. It was about respect. He said that sometimes walking away was the only way to be heard. The shuttle lifted off silently, leaving the council tower behind. Inside the grand chamber, Varun finally spoke again, his voice trembling slightly. He said that the humans would return, that they always came back to reason. But even he did not believe his own words. In that single moment, as the sound of the shuttle faded into the distance, every delegate in the chamber felt the same quiet fear settle in their hearts. They all understood something that none of them wanted to say aloud. Humanity had left the room and the galaxy would never be the same again. The council chamber that once buzzed with energy was now silent. After the humans left, no one spoke for a long time. Varun sat motionless, his crystalline form dull under the lights. Around him, other delegates shifted uneasily, whispering in low tones. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had walked away. For years, the council had relied on Earth's cooperation in trade, defense, and technology. Humanity's sudden departure was more than an insult. It was a threat to stability, Varun finally spoke, his voice echoing faintly, saying that the council must continue its work and that fear should not rule their decisions. But his tone lacked conviction and everyone knew it. Outside the chamber, the story had already spread. Across the stars, on every station and colony, the same words appeared on glowing screens. Humans exit talks. On the human embassy ship orbiting Araxis Prime, Nathan Cole sat quietly in his quarters. Laura King entered with a datapad and said that the news was everywhere. Nathan nodded and said that was the point. He looked tired but calm. He told Laura that walking away was the hardest choice he had made, but that it was the only one that meant something. Laura agreed but said that the council would see it as defiance. Nathan replied that maybe it was. He said that humanity had begged for fairness long enough, and that they would not beg anymore. The ship's captain announced that the vessel was ready to return to Earth. As they prepared for departure, Nathan looked out at the planet below and said softly that the galaxy had just changed, and no one realized it yet. On Araxis Prime, panic began to grow. News channels replayed the moment Nathan stood and left the chamber, his calm expression burning into the memory of every viewer. Analysts debated what it meant. Some said it was a bluff. Others warned that Earth was cutting all ties. In the council's central tower, Varun met with his advisors. They spoke in hushed tones about the implications. Without human trade, many worlds would lose supplies of vital minerals, food, and energy. The humans had built most of the galactic communication network, and though others could maintain it, no one understood it as deeply as they did. Varun ordered that communication with Earth be maintained at all costs. He instructed envoys to send messages of reassurance and to request a private meeting with Nathan Cole, but no reply came. The human embassy ship left orbit without transmitting a single word. For the first time in decades, the council was ignored. Days turned into weeks and the silence from Earth continued. Reports arrived that human trade ships were returning to their home ports and that fleets were withdrawing from joint patrol zones. On several border worlds, local governments began to panic as human companies shut down operations. Prices rose, shortages spread, and quiet unrest began to take root. In the great council halls, Varun faced growing anger. Delegates demanded that action be taken. Some said that the humans should be punished for their arrogance, others said that diplomacy must continue. Varun listened but found no clear path. He knew that any attempt to threaten Earth could end in disaster. Humanity had proven before that it would not be intimidated. He remembered the war on the Rim worlds, where human fleets had arrived late but ended the conflict in days with precision and fury. He remembered how even then the Council had whispered that humanity was dangerous. Now those whispers had turned into open fear. On Earth, Nathan Cole met with leaders of the Terran Union in a vast underground command chamber beneath the capital. The atmosphere was tense but united. Screens around them showed star maps filled with trade routes and fleet positions. Laura stood beside Nathan as he addressed the Council of Nations. He explained that humanity would suspend all cooperation with the Galactic Council until equal recognition was granted. He said that Earth would now focus on strengthening its own alliances and securing its borders. Many leaders nodded in agreement. They were tired of being treated as outsiders by species that depended on their labor and intelligence. Nathan reminded them that respect was not given. It was taken when others refused to offer it. The Council of Nations voted unanimously to approve his plan. Humanity would stand alone if it had to. In the weeks that followed, change spread quickly. Human space yards became active around the clock. Fleets that once patrolled for the Council now trained for independent defense. New alliances formed quietly with smaller species that had also felt ignored by the Council. On the colonies of Mars and Titan, construction began on massive new stations that could serve as trade hubs outside Council control. The Terran Union called it the New Frontier Initiative, but others in the galaxy called it something else, the rise of the Dominion. In the shadows of distant stars, rumors began that humans were developing technology far beyond what they had shared. Varun spies confirmed that research facilities on Luna and Europa had gone dark to outside contact. Even human scientists who had worked with alien teams were recalled home. The galaxy was watching, but humanity was no longer explaining. Varun grew more anxious with each report. The Council's unity began to fracture. Some members wanted to apologize and restore ties. Others demanded sanctions. One delegate from the Zarin species shouted that if the humans wished for isolation, the council should let them have it and see how long they survived. But another warned that humanity had always thrived in isolation, that pressure only made them stronger. Varun tried to calm them but could see the fear growing in every face. He asked for patience, saying that perhaps Nathan Cole would return once tempers cooled. But deep inside, he doubted it. He could still see Nathan's calm expression as he walked out, a look not of anger but of resolve. It haunted him. On the human flagship returning to Earth, Nathan stood on the observation deck with Laura. The stars stretched out like rivers of light. Laura asked if he thought the council would come after them. Nathan shook his head and said that they would be too afraid to. He said that fear was more powerful than any weapon. Laura looked thoughtful and said that maybe that was why they feared humans the most. Not because of what they had done, but because of what they might do. Nathan smiled faintly and said that maybe one day the galaxy would understand, but until then humanity would build its own way. The ship continued toward Earth, a silent arrow in the dark, and behind them the galaxy held its breath. The galaxy could not stop talking about what the humans had done. From the central worlds to the smallest colonies, the same words filled every news channel and message board. Humans exit talks. Everyone had an opinion, but no one truly understood what it meant. On many planets, ordinary people whispered that the humans had finally grown tired of being pushed around. Others said it was a mistake that would lead to war. The Galactic Council met again in the Great Chamber on Araxis Prime, but the mood was different this time. The bright lights felt dimmer, the air felt heavy. Varun sat at the center, his crystalline body dull with worry. Delegates argued loudly around him, accusing each other of weakness and fear. Some wanted to send a peace mission to Earth at once. Others demanded the Council prepare for defense in case humanity turned against them. Varun raised his hand and called for silence. He said that no one should act in haste. He said that humans were proud but logical, that they would not attack unless provoked. But as he spoke, even he could feel the tremor of doubt in his words. While the council argued, Nathan Cole stood on Earth's orbital station, looking out at the blue curve of the planet below. Around him, the station buzzed with activity. Engineers worked on new ships, scientists analyzed trade routes, and diplomats prepared messages to smaller worlds. Laura King stood beside him, holding a tablet filled with reports from across human space. She said that production had doubled since their return, that colonies were uniting faster than expected. Nathan said that unity came easily when people felt cornered. He said that the galaxy had given them something precious, a reason to stand together. Laura nodded but asked if they could really stand alone forever. Nathan looked out at the stars and said that forever was a long time, but for now they needed to prove they could. He said that respect could not be given. It had to be earned by strength and will. In the weeks that followed, human fleets began patrolling the borders of their space. The ships were not aggressive, but their presence was clear. Trade routes once shared with Council worlds were now guarded by Terran ships that demanded clearance codes and inspected cargo. Some alien traders complained, but none dared challenge them. On distant worlds, people began to notice that human technology was changing. New ship designs were appearing, faster and more powerful than anything the Council had approved. Rumors spread that Earth had unlocked technologies the Council had long forbidden. Varun received reports of human outposts being built in unexplored regions, far beyond the old treaty lines. He ordered surveillance drones to observe, but many of them disappeared without a trace. The Council's unease turned into fear. On one Council world, a senator from the Carthon species addressed the assembly with anger. He said that the humans were preparing for war and that the Council must act. He demanded that the Council send a fleet to remind humanity of its place. But another delegate, a small-scaled creature named Laura, said that such action would be foolish. She reminded the Chamber of the Rim Wars and how the humans had ended them in days when others had failed for years. She said that if the humans were provoked, they would not stop until they won. The room fell silent. Varun said that no fleets would be sent. He said that they must first understand what humanity truly wanted. But deep inside, he already knew the answer. Humanity wanted freedom from control. They wanted to build without asking permission. They wanted to walk their own path, and that made them dangerous. On Mars, the new Terran Defense Council met in a massive glass hall overlooking the shipyards. Nathan arrived with Laura and was greeted by commanders and scientists. They presented plans for the expansion of human space. New colonies, new trade networks, and defense systems that would make invasion impossible. Nathan listened and approved most of it, but he warned that their goal was not war. He said that strength was a tool for peace, not domination. He said that the council feared them because they could not control them, and that fear would keep the peace better than treaties ever did. The commanders nodded in agreement. Outside the windows, hundreds of ships floated in orbit, each one a symbol of human resolve. Laura looked at them and whispered that maybe this was what the galaxy needed to see. Not anger, but certainty. Back on Auraxis Prime, Varun could feel the council breaking apart. Old alliances were fading. Some species secretly reached out to Earth for trade and protection. Others pulled away, afraid to be caught between the council and the humans. The balance that had held for centuries was slipping away. Varun's advisors begged him to take action, to show strength, but he hesitated. He knew that if they acted rashly, they might trigger something no one could stop. Late one night, he stood alone in the council chamber, looking at the empty seats. The light from the twin moons shone through the glass ceiling, casting pale reflections across his crystalline body. He remembered the human ambassador's words. Nathan had said that humanity would no longer ask for equality, they would take it. Varun whispered those words aloud, and for the first time, he understood what they meant. The humans were not just leaving the council, they were leaving the old order behind. Weeks passed, and still there was no communication from Earth. The council sent envoys, messages, and gifts, but none were answered. Some ships that tried to cross into human space were turned away without explanation. The humans said only that council vessels were not permitted until further notice. Fear turned into quiet panic. On the outer colonies, human-built machines powered entire worlds. When maintenance requests went unanswered, power grids began to fail. Crops died, cities dimmed, and people began to understand what it meant to lose humanity's cooperation. Varun received reports of protests on several planets demanding that relations be restored, but he had no answers to give. The council had built its comfort on the backs of human invention, and now that foundation was gone, on Earth. Nathan stood once more before the leaders of the Terran Union. He reported that the galaxy was beginning to feel their absence. He said that it was not revenge but justice, that now the council would learn the value of respect. Laura stood beside him, her expression firm. She said that the galaxy had always looked down on humanity, but now it looked up in fear. Nathan nodded and said that fear was not their goal, but sometimes fear was the only teacher that listened. As he spoke, the room fell silent, filled with the hum of quiet power from the stations above. Humanity had not fired a single shot, but their decision had already shaken the galaxy. They had withdrawn, but in their silence they had become louder than ever. And far away, on worlds that had once dismissed them, even the proudest species now whispered a truth they could no longer deny. The humans were gone, and yet somehow they were everywhere. Fear began to spread through the council worlds like a slow-moving fire. Every report that came from human space made it worse. Traders said that human fleets no longer answered hails from non-human ships. Colonies that had once depended on Earth's supplies were beginning to experience shortages. The Galactic Council's communication networks, half of which relied on human-made technology, were starting to malfunction. At first, the council tried to hide the problems from the public, but soon even the news channels could not ignore them. Panic started to rise among the citizens of many worlds. They had believed that the council was strong enough to keep peace and order, but now it seemed powerless without human cooperation. In the great chamber of Auraxis Prime, Varun called another meeting, his crystal form dim with stress. He listened as delegates shouted over one another. Some wanted to send peace envoys, some wanted to threaten, and some wanted to pretend everything was still under control. Varun finally raised his hands and said that silence from humanity was a message of its own. He said that the council must face the truth that it had pushed the humans too far. On Earth, Nathan Cole watched the council's confusion unfold from the command center deep beneath the Terran Union headquarters. Screens showed intercepted transmissions from across the galaxy, messages filled with desperation and fear. Laura King entered the room carrying a new report. She said that several outer systems had contacted human diplomats directly, asking for trade agreements independent from the council. Nathan read the list of names and smiled faintly. He said that the council's control was cracking faster than expected. He said that when power depends on fear and arrogance, it collapses the moment those things are turned against it. Laura asked if they should accept the new offers. Nathan said they would, but quietly. He said that the Terran Union did not want open conflict. They wanted to build a new system, one based on mutual respect. He said that fear was useful only if it led to change. Days later, the first human convoy entered space claimed by the Varan Dominion, one of the Council's largest members. The convoy carried medical supplies and food to planets suffering from shortages. The Varan officials hesitated but allowed them to pass. When the ships departed, the local population cheered. For the first time in months, they had hope. Reports of this reached the Council, and Varun realized what it meant. Humanity was not just isolating itself, it was replacing the Council piece by piece. It was building something new. He called a meeting with his closest advisors and asked what could be done. One of them, a small insectoid named Krell, said that they could still stop the humans if they acted now. He said that a united fleet could surround Earth and force them to reopen talks, but another advisor said that such a move would be suicide. He said that no one knew what kind of weapons the humans had built during their silence. Varun listened and said nothing. He knew that the humans had already won without firing a shot. Across the galaxy, human influence grew quietly but steadily. The Terran Union's fleets escorted merchants, scientists, and engineers to distant colonies. Human-built satellites began to appear near worlds that had once belonged entirely to the Council. People called them silent watchers. They never interfered, but their presence was always felt. The Council's media tried to paint humanity as dangerous, but the message failed. Too many people remembered the stability that humans had brought in the past. They remembered how human engineers had built roads, ships, and power grids that kept civilizations alive. Now those same people wondered why the Council had treated them so poorly. Varun saw the shift and felt powerless to stop it. One evening, Varun stood alone in his office overlooking the silver towers of Araxis Prime. The skyline shimmered under the twin suns, but the beauty brought him no comfort. He thought about the first day he had met Nathan Cole years ago, when Earth had first joined the Council. Nathan had been young then, full of hope, eager to cooperate. Varun had liked him and believed that humanity would bring new energy to the Council, but politics and fear had ruined it. Varun realized that the Council had not feared human aggression, it had feared human potential. He sighed and said softly that maybe the humans had been right to leave. At that same moment, far across the galaxy, Nathan stood in a similar position inside the observation dome of a Terran station orbiting Mars. He looked at the endless sea of stars and thought about the Council. Laura joined him and asked if he ever regretted walking away. Nathan said that he regretted that it had been necessary, but not that it had been done. He said that sometimes peace required distance. Weeks passed and the situation only worsened for the Council. Economic reports showed massive collapses on several core worlds. Civil unrest broke out on others. The words human dominion began appearing in underground news broadcasts, referring to the growing network of alliances humanity was quietly building. Varun's attempts to open communication with Earth were ignored. Finally, in desperation, he decided to send a personal message to Nathan Cole himself. He recorded a simple statement, acknowledging the Council's mistakes and requesting a meeting. He said that the galaxy needed balance again. The message was transmitted through secure channels and then silence followed. Days went by with no reply. Then one night a single signal came through. It was short and came from a Terran relay near Jupiter. It said only one sentence: "Humanity remembers." No one knew what it meant, but Varun felt the weight of those words deep inside. In the following days, human activity increased near the borders of Council space. New stations appeared, large and heavily fortified. The Council's military monitors watched nervously but did not interfere. Rumors began to spread that humanity was preparing to declare full independence from the Council's governance. On the worlds that had once depended on the Council, people began to whisper that perhaps this was the dawn of a new order. On Earth, Nathan met with the Terran Union leaders one last time before the next phase of their plan. He said that the time for waiting was over. He said that the galaxy had seen what humanity could do in silence, and now it was time to show them what they could do with purpose. Laura stood beside him, her eyes bright with determination. She said that the Council would finally understand that Earth did not need permission to exist. Nathan smiled faintly and said that understanding was coming sooner than anyone thought. As the meeting ended, the Terran fleet prepared to move. Dozens of ships left orbit in perfect formation. their engines glowing like stars. They were not going to attack. They were going to establish presence in every major system that had once doubted them. Across the galaxy, people watched their movements and felt both fear and admiration. The humans were no longer a member of the Galactic Council. They were something greater now. And as their ships disappeared into the dark, a quiet truth settled across the stars. The humans had walked away from the table, but now they were building a new one, and soon the entire galaxy would have no choice but to sit at it. The galaxy waited and watched as humanity moved with quiet purpose. The Terran fleets patrolled the outer borders of their territory, their ships large and silent against the backdrop of stars. The humans had made no threats, had fired no weapons, but every council member knew that the balance of power had shifted. On Earth, Nathan Cole stood in the command center of the Central Terran Fleet, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the monitors showing human ships moving to new systems. Laura King stood beside him, holding reports of every movement, every trade route, every communication intercepted. She said that the Council's panic was spreading. Nathan nodded and said that was expected. He said that fear often taught lessons better than war did. He reminded her that humanity's goal was not destruction, but freedom, and that the galaxy would see that very soon. The Council met in emergency sessions that stretched for hours. Varun, once so confident, now looked tired and uncertain. Delegates argued and shouted, but no solution came. Some suggested fleets, others proposed diplomacy, but all knew that the humans had already grown beyond their control. One counselor, a tall metallic species from the Gloran world, said that Earth should be punished before it became untouchable. Another argued that punishment would only make them stronger. The chamber fell silent, the weight of their fear heavier than any voice. They realized that the humans had not attacked, but their absence was more powerful than any weapon. The Council could not agree, and that disunity spread like a virus across the galaxy. Meanwhile, on the outer colonies, humans quietly established new trade routes and supply stations. Farmers on distant worlds received the first shipments of seeds, tools, and energy cells since the Council had left them to suffer. Engineers rebuilt power grids, and human-built communication arrays connected systems that had long been isolated. People across the galaxy began to understand that humanity had returned, not as a Council member, but as a force that could act without permission. The humans showed that strength could be measured not in weapons fired, but in resources shared and order maintained. Across Auraxis Prime, Varun watched these developments with a sinking heart. Every move by Earth's fleets and colonies was a reminder of what the Council had lost, and he could do nothing but watch and worry. Back on Earth, Nathan called a council of Terran leaders. They gathered in the main hall, screens showing human activity across the galaxy. Nathan said that their mission was clear. They must build a system based on fairness and cooperation, but they must do it outside the Council's rules. He said that the Council had failed to respect humanity, so humanity would no longer rely on their judgment. Laura said that many species were already willing to work with Earth, and Nathan nodded. He said that trust must be earned and loyalty respected. The leaders understood, and plans were set to expand human influence peacefully but firmly. Trade, protection, and infrastructure would follow, and the galaxy would take notice. Nathan emphasized that they would not provoke war, but they would not be threatened either. Humanity had left the table, but they were now building their own, and the rest of the galaxy would have no choice but to come to it if they wanted to survive. Weeks passed, and the effects were clear. Alien governments struggled to maintain control over their citizens as human influence grew. Council communication networks were disrupted, but human relays provided services to many worlds previously dependent on the Council. News of human fleets arriving in new systems without conflict spread quickly. People called it the Human Dominion, not because of fear, but because humanity now led through action and efficiency. Varun and his advisors debated in endless sessions, but every report only deepened their worry. The humans had left the Council, but they were everywhere in the galaxy. Every step taken by humans strengthened their presence, and no one could stop them. Some Council members tried to send envoys again, hoping to negotiate, but every message went unanswered. Humanity did not ignore out of malice, but because they had nothing left to ask for. Nathan walked through the halls of the Terran Union Command Center, observing the work being done. Engineers and scientists moved with purpose, building new stations, ships, and networks. Laura joined him and said that even without communication, Other species were responding to their actions. Nathan said that this was exactly what they had intended. He said that sometimes action speaks louder than words, and that the galaxy had finally learned to pay attention. The humans were not afraid of confrontation, but they did not need it. The Council's fear was proof of humanity's power, and Nathan knew that this was only the beginning. Finally, a message arrived from a minor council member, a species that had once ignored humanity. The message was simple: your efforts are noted. Trade is welcomed. Protection is requested. Nathan read it aloud to Laura and the Terran Council leaders. Laura smiled and said that the tide had truly turned. Nathan nodded and said that the galaxy would learn that humanity's strength was not in conquest but in purpose. They had left the Council, but in their absence they had become indispensable. The humans had not started a war, yet the galaxy trembled at their resolve. Nathan looked out the observation windows at the stars beyond and said that they would continue to build, to grow, and to show that respect and freedom were worth more than fear and control. The humans had walked away, but in doing so they had become the force that would shape the future of the galaxy.